everyone, welcome to another video from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is Az, and today we're going to be using that classic FPL buzzword of essential. Which players are essential in our Game Week 1 team? Well, if truth be told, no player is essential. You can obviously play the game your own way. You can pick whatever players you want. You can do well with whatever players you want. The word essential is more banded around for which players do we think could really punish you if you don't have, and which are we expected to start the season really strongly, and also which players might massively outperform their value. So we use the term essential. FPL is a game of choice, and you can get ahead of the pack by going against some of these options. But we're going to talk about some of the players that are going to be really popular and are going to be hard to ignore. So what I've done in this video is I've divided it into 3 sections. I've got the essential players. These are 2 players that I will 100% be starting with in my Game Week 1 team. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. They are absolute locks in, as I'm sure there will be for a lot of people. Then I've got the near essentials. So these are the players who I think pretty much are almost certain to be in my side and in a great deal of other sides, but I can see why people might be looking towards other players, or there might be a bit more risk kind of associated with how they perform this season. And then the third category is the hard to ignore category. So again, these are players that I think demonstrate really good value. They're going to be in a lot of sides. They will likely feature in my side as well. In fact, all the players I'm going to be talking about today will likely feature in my Game Week 1 side. But again, I think there's a bit more scope and room to manoeuvre away from them. So let me know in the comments if you agree with what I'm saying. A lot of these things are going to be sort of fairly obvious for the hardcore players. You know, when I'm sure there'll be no prize for guessing who the first 2 players I'm going to talk about is. But hopefully I can present some stats and some reasoning behind that as well, and for some of the other players too. Before I do that, I just want to talk about the Fantasy Football Scout members area. So this is where I've got all the data from today. If you're interested in making your own stats tables like what I've got here, you can easily do that. Just head over to Fantasy Scout, sign up as a member, and get creating your own tables. So I'm going to be focusing on 3 of the options from the stats tables here, which are FPL points, total FPL points from last season, FPL value. So this is price of their price now, so for the season coming, and it's their FPL points divided by that price. So that gives a sense of how good a value they are for that kind of price tag. And then minutes per FPL point. So obviously FPL points doesn't take into account when players are injured or banned or whatever. Minutes per FPL point is a good metric to use to see how quickly players are earning points and which ones get the points the speediest. So once again, head over to fantasyfootballscout.co.uk, sign up as a member if you're interested in doing these. This is set as a public table as well. Just type in essential players and search for it, and you can see this if you want to learn a bit more. But let's get going. So the first 2 players I'm going to talk about. Oh, what a surprise. It's Mohamed Salah. He's number 1 essential pick, and Trent Alexander-Arnold coming in at 7.5. I mean, looking at Mohamed Salah, generally, he's been such a consistent performer for us over the last few years. You know, hitting 265 points last season. That was best in the league. His minutes per FPL point was 10.5. That was second to only another player we're going to talk about in this video, Ben Chilwell. Ben Chilwell didn't play that many games, only played 5 or 6 games. So for Salah to, have be the second one consistently over the season, and with the dip that he had towards the end, just shows what a great option he was. Bear in mind as well, in terms of total points, Salah did go off to the African Cup of Nations as well, so that Salah would likely have been even higher. Just really demonstrates what an amazing player he is. In terms of value of the really premium price players is difficult. The lower price players who score well, they're the ones that obviously have the best value. This is why it's such a useful metric to help you pick out the kind of bargains. Salah's value of 69th player over the season, 20.4, doesn't really take into account things like the captaincy, particularly in the first half of the season, and other things like that. For a player to be 13 million, they need to be, scoring hugely. I think what this just shows is even when a 13 million player scores 265 points, that money could be spread around the rest of your team if that captaincy wasn't such a big factor. I think people are going to be tempted to take Salah out of their drafts. and go with someone else, especially when you see a stat like that and you think about how much value you can get from bringing in sort of 8-9 million midfielders and that kind of thing. But again, just bear in mind this doesn't take into the captaincy, and as we're going to talk about, the first 5 fixtures for Salah and potentially a player from City as well just gives you that amazing captaincy options over the first 5. So I wouldn't look too much into that value, but it is interesting that when they've got these premium prices, it skews that way. Trent is there. Trent is there at 7.5 million this season. I've said on a couple of videos, I think he could have easily been 8.5, 9 million. He was the 3rd highest point scorer last season, which I think just shows how the defenders have changed so massively, and how FPL kind of haven't really adjusted to that yet, and that's why there's such good value in the defence this season, and why we're seeing people switching to 4 and 5 at the back. Well, in the past, it's been 5 in midfield, or for most of the time I played FPL, it's always been those 3 forwards up top. In terms of value, though, quite interestingly, he comes in 11th, 27.7 is the value. This is below quite a few goalkeepers, for example, who obviously have a low price and scored well. Alisson, for example, is the highest in terms of FPL value, 5.5, 176 points. He got. You've then got like Lloris, you've got Edison, even Sanchez. They're all higher, and Salah, they're all higher than Trent, just because they've got that lower price, even though they score kind of less points. In terms of that defender though, and that he's second only. Actually, there's a few players who offer better value than him. There's Gabriel, has Cancelo, there's Matip, even Van Dijk as well at 6.5 offered better value than Trent last season. I actually think Trent underperformed last season on what he's capable of. I mean, it sounds ridiculous for a player to get 208 points from defence again. I think that's a return. If you've got that, you certainly wouldn't be unhappy with it. But I do think he can get even more next season. I mean, he had 12 assists last season. That's been bettered in 2 of his previous 4 seasons. He had 15 in 2019-20. I think he can get more assists. It was the 18 clean sheets for Liverpool last season that really kind of took him up. They only conceded 22 goals, which is outrageous. If this player can get 20 clean sheets again, if he can add a couple more goals, he only got 2 last season. If he can get a couple more assists, this could be the makings of a 250, 260 point defender, which would be absolutely incredible. He's currently owned by 57.1% of the game, so he's highly differential, and he's going to obviously feature on a lot of sides. Trent is someone who his baseline seems to be around 200 for the season. I mean, in Liverpool's terrible season in 2021, he got 160 points. But I think that was a complete anomaly. He's going to get 200 plus points again this season. So he's not a player who I'd be starting the season without. Let's take a look at near essentials. I've got 3 players in this bracket. Some of you might be surprised that I didn't bump Erling Haaland up to the essential bracket. I will talk about him in just a second. I'm going to start with João Cancelo, 7 million. He'll set you back. He was the 5th scoring player last season, 5th highest scoring player with 201 points. That's 5th. His minutes per FPL point was 16.1. That puts him in 20th in kind of the overall standings. But in terms of value, if he got that again, he'd be 5th on the list, 28.7. Remember, he comes in a little bit cheaper than Trent. So the 5th best value player. Again, it's a player who I think underperformed on what he's capable of. I mean, the amount of clean sheets that Man City get gives Cancelo a 170, 180 point baseline anyway. He always seems to be someone who can deliver more. He had most shots of all defenders last season. He still came away with 11 assists, but you feel like he could have got more. Only 1 goal as well. If he can really start adding some goals to his locker, then that'd be really interesting. What will be interesting, again, is if Cucurella comes in. A lot of people are expecting Man City to sign another fullback, and many people are expecting it to be Cucurella as well. Even if it's not Cucurella, if it's another fullback, it might mean reduced minutes for Cancelo. He played pretty much every match he was available for last year. We might see him dropping out a little bit more. My sense is, though, that he's too good. He's just too good in that team to drop. He's one of the best fullbacks I've ever seen. He absolutely deserves to be talked about in elite status. Last season, I think, was his breakout season from an FPL perspective. Only got 138 points. In his season before that, I would very much expect him to be getting over 200 points again. So, if you're thinking about 7 million forwards like Tony, Mitrovic, you've got Calvert-Lewin at 8, Bamford at 7.5. it would be much more of a surprise if those players hit 200 than João Cancelo for me. The only sort of caveat with Cancelo and why I haven't put him in that essential bracket is that you've got someone like Diaz there at 6, you've got Laporte there as well. You have got this slight worry if another fullback comes in of a few less minutes, and you've got such other good defensive options as well. So I would be almost certain that Cancelo is going to be in my side, but if I saw someone trying to save a bit of money going for a Diaz or a Laporte, I think that's a better saving of the money than going for like a Van Dijk or Robertson over Trent, for example. So that's why Cancelo's there, but I think he's already at 45.6% ownership. I think he's going to continue to be a big factor in people's teams. Let's take a look at Reece James then. I've put him in near essentials as well. He will cost you 6 million this season. Again, I think he's underpriced. I think they've underpriced a lot of these defenders this season. In terms of points, he got 141 points, which puts him at 32nd in the list. But bear in mind, he missed 12 games through injury. So, missed a sizable chunk of the season, nearly a third of the season. Still came away with 141 points. A few problems with Chelsea, maybe defensively. Rudiger's off. Thiago Silva's adding another year to his age. We don't know who they're going to get. There's talk about De Ligt coming in, for example, which would be a great signing for them. But there's a bit of reshuffling in defence. Also, Reece James can play at centre back as well, like we know, and drop into that 3. Chelsea could switch to a back 4. There's a little bit of kind of risk associated with him, which is why, again, I don't think we can really put him in the essential bracket. In terms of value, in terms of minutes per FPL point, though, 13.4, that puts him 9th on the list. Amazing, again, for a defender to be featuring in the top 10. In terms of value, 23.5 puts him in 39th. Again, though, this is a total of their points divided by their price. If we adjust James for 200 points, which he was absolutely on course to do, if he'd played in those 12 games, he would be getting a value of 33.3, which would put him first. He'd be the most value player in the game. So if you think Reece James is going to get 200 points this season, essentially, he should definitely be a name on your team sheet. And I think the fact that they can rest him, I say rest in the sense that they can drop him back to centre-back, I think that only boosts his appeal. So I'm expecting attacking returns. I'm expecting him to play in games that he might have missed last season. He's got the World Cup as well that he's going to be playing for. I'd be very surprised if I didn't start with him. But again, there's a few factors to consider. Third player on this list, Erling Haaland. You might have heard of him. He has signed from Dortmund for City. He will cost you 11.5 million in FPL. It's very hard to judge a player like this. Obviously, I don't have any Premier League stats to talk about. What we do have is the kind of Bundesliga stats in which he played just over 20 games. He was injured for quite a significant chunk of that campaign. He got 23 goals, something like that, 8 assists as well. Had a absolutely barnstorming season. I found it quite hard to place him. I think Haaland is going to in terms of total points, he's going to be somewhere in the 200 to 300 mark, providing he's fit. I think he'll probably start 30 games if things go well this season. I think Pep will find ways to manage his minutes and things like that. Again, it's kind of difficult to judge. I've put him in a projected 200 points. This is actually based on Aguero, who had a fantastic season in 18-19. He got 21 goals, 11 assists, and got 201 points in FPL. So if we're thinking that kind of 30-ish attacking returns for Haaland, 20 goals, 11 assists is about kind of, I'd say that's quite conservative actually. But if we think he's going to get that, then that would put him sort of 6th in the overall points compared to last season. And he would again be that kind of captaincy option for us. The fact that we're saying Reece James can get to 200 and I'm projecting Haaland at 200 again, I think shows more about how powerful the defence is rather than how limited I am with Haaland. I think Haaland's going to be an absolute superb addition to the league and City. Obviously, we never saw Aguero hitting the 30 goals mark. His best season was in 14-15 before Pep, but he managed kind of 20 goals sort of every season. Haaland could obviously dwarf that completely, but as an elite finisher that Aguero was, I've set a baseline at 200 points anyway. We'll see how much he beats that by. If he does get 200 points and he plays the 30 games I said, that would put him in 10th in terms of minutes per FPL point compared to players last season. And in terms of value, it would drop him right down to 114th. A value of 17.4. So again, this is where the high price tags, these players really need to perform. And for 11 million, 11.5, for that value to be high, he needs to be getting 250 points, 300 points. But again, it doesn't take into captaincy into consideration. So do bear that in mind. That stat looks scary, but in terms of value, he might not do it in terms of pure points. But when you add in the captaincy, it absolutely will. Now, Haaland is an interesting one. I mean, the reason I haven't put him in the kind of essential bracket is a couple of reasons. Firstly, is that injury record. I think people might be tempted to go for De Bruyne or Son, for example. I'm not suggesting that is completely the right play. I'll definitely be starting with Haaland. But if there's worries about how he's going to adjust to the league, adjust to Pep's system, will he take a bit of time to get going? I can see why people might move away from him. And again, when we're looking at Son and Kane, they've got that Southampton at home fixture in Gameweek 1, which looks absolutely amazing. City away at West Ham in Gameweek 1. So people who are starting with Kane, starting with Son, and looking to move to Haaland for Bournemouth in Gameweek 2, again, I think that's a completely viable strategy. So I'm not here to tell you that you need to start with Haaland in Gameweek 1. I don't have him in the same bracket as Salah and Trent, who've got Fulham in that first game. I don't think you can start without them. But Haaland, there could be a bit of a wait and see. We've seen with someone like Werner, for example, how long it takes him. And he's got that tricky game in Gameweek 1. So if you just wanted to give yourself a bit more time to monitor, then you absolutely can. One thing I will say about the Salah-Haaland double up for captaincy is it's really, really nice for the first 5 game weeks. So on the screen, I'm just showing a kind of fixture chart. Here, the Blues show the Liverpool-Man City rotation that you can go with. So in Game Week 1, you can captain Salah away at Fulham. In Game Week 2, you've got Haaland at home to Bournemouth. In Game Week 3, you've got a choice. Man United away for Liverpool or Newcastle away for Man City. Both good games. Probably fancy Liverpool in that one, given what they did to United last season. Then in Game Week 4, you've got Bournemouth at home for Liverpool. And then in Game Week 5, you've got Nottingham Forest at home for Man City. So essentially, in the first 5 game weeks, if you go with the Salah and Haaland double up, you get 4 newly promoted teams out of your first 5 to captain those 2 in. So again, that is what kind of I think if from game week 2, I would actually drive Haaland up to that essential bracket if he looks fit and he looks like he's adjusted, just so you've got someone in for that Bournemouth game. If he doesn't, then I think we could be looking towards the likes of De Bruyne or someone like that, because Liverpool got Palace in that game, not a bad stretch, but that Bournemouth at home game looks prime for a 4 or 5-0 rout for City. Horrible game for Bournemouth to be going into in game week 2. So yeah, I think people might be looking to start without Haaland or a City player, but there's going to be a lot of clamour for them in game week 2. Finally, let's have a look at the other category, which is the hard to ignore. Again, I don't think these 3 players are essential, but they're players that I'm certainly looking at and sort of trying to get them kind of in my side. You can only pick one, obviously, out of Luis Diaz, who I've got on the screen, Andrew Robertson. If you pair them with Salah and Trent, you can't have all 4, unfortunately. We need 4 Liverpool spots. I've also got Ben Chilwell on the list as well, who I'll talk about in a second. So Luis Diaz is really, really popular. I think he talks about a lot. Comes in at 8 million, which is really cheap. I looked at his points from Game Week 24, which is when he signed for Liverpool. A little bit disappointing. Got 64 points, which puts him 37th on the list of all players. Obviously, there's that kind of adjustment period, but we saw with someone like Kulusevski, for example, who just hit the ground running and featured really highly in those rankings. Minutes per FPL point, 15.1, that puts him 27th, so just inside the top 30. Again, it's not amazing. And then value of 8, which puts him 129th. It took me ages to go down the list to kind of to find him. So realistically, if we're looking at last season's numbers, it doesn't indicate to me that he's going to be a kind of a Mane type figure. I think that clinical edge is lacking. He hasn't got that ability to get FPL returns out of nothing. It's a new look Liverpool side. There's going to be some adjustments, with Núñez, Jota, Diaz, 5 sub rule. There's plenty of reasons to kind of worry a little bit about having Diaz in your team. I certainly wouldn't have him in that kind of essential bracket. There's reasons enough to not go with him. However, I think at 8 million, we're going to see a different side of him. He hasn't got to hit the heights of Mane. He hasn't got to hit the heights of 11 to 12 million. If he gets a kind of an attacking return every game, or even once every other game, you might even be happy with that if he's getting bonus as well. And you've got to think in his second season he's going to massively improve at Liverpool as well. He's one of the most talented players I've ever seen play football. His touch, his ability, his crossing, everything is absolutely superb. His movement. So I'm expecting big things from him. But again, if you base this on last season stats, it might just be a little bit of a wait and see. I think from an FPL perspective, he disappointed last year, even though he had such a big impact for Liverpool in the second half of the season. Robertson's next, 7 million for him. His points, 186, that puts him 8th in the list. Another kind of fantastic season for him. Again, 7 million players are getting close to 200 points. Can't be sniffed at. In terms of value, 26.6, that put him 19th in the list. So in the kind of top 20 players. And again, I think he's a player who could do even better next season on corners, could get even more assists. He's started to add goals to his locker as well. So if you think he's going to kick on, he could be a great option. A minutes per FPL point, 13.7, that puts him 12th on the list. So again, he's beating a lot of midfielders, a lot of strikers. Defenders being so highly on this list is something that just didn't really happen a few seasons ago. We're talking about quite a few of them already in this video. So again, I think we're probably all going to be going for the Liverpool triple up, given they play Fulham in that first week. I think it's going to be one of Diaz or Robertson. I think Robertson is the kind of the safer option, but it does mean you might have to go 5 at the back if you're getting the likes of James, Cancelo, Trent, Chilwell, all these guys. If you don't want to do that and you want to be a bit more balanced and you think Diaz is going to kick on this season, then you go for him. But again, they're hard to ignore in the sense that I think everyone's going to be going with triple Liverpool and with one of those two as well. And then finally, I've got Ben Chilwell here. So he's coming in at 6 million. Again, an amazing price. I looked at his stats from Gameweek 7 to 12 when he was fit, and it's pretty exciting reading. I mean, in terms of points over that period, he was second with 54, second only to Salah, who obviously is 13 million, was 13 million last season, so this is a 6 million defender. I think he was about 5.6 million when this was going on. Minutes per FPL point, 10 minutes per point, that was second again, only to Salah as well. And in terms of value, I mean, 9 obviously put him first because he was scoring so many points and was so cheap. So again, it's similar things to James. He's had this injury as well, to come back from, but he did play, a minute against Watford in the last game last season. If he can show anywhere near glimpses of getting back to this form that he was in during this spell, he's going to be in that essential bracket. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Chelsea line up at the back next season. If you're worried about James dropping back in the centre back, for example, when you really want that out on the left, then I think Chilwell is the man to go for. And again, it's a great thing for England to have him back because we're really struggling at left back, kind of without him. So yeah, I think the signs are there for Chilwell to really kick on. And again, Everton at home in the first week is really nice. So that's it. That's my list. I hope that's been useful for people. I'm sure a lot of these players you're already considering. They've been in and out of your team already. Hopefully the stats have shown a few things that you might not have considered. Please like this video if you have enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel as well. We've got loads of pre-season content coming, and I will see you on the next one. So thanks for watching and see you soon.